The letter arrived at Downing Street on December 23rd, 4 pages, hand-signed by 4 men who'd spent their lives defending Britain. Not protesters, not activists, not politicians, generals, decorated military officers, men who understood war, strategy, and the rules that separate civilization from barbarity. And they were accusing their own prime minister of complicity in war crimes. The lead signatory was Brigadier John Deverell, 30 years in the British Army, defense attaché to Saudi Arabia and Yemen during 9/11. A man who'd seen conflict up close and understood its complexities. He wasn't writing to criticize from ignorance. He was writing from experience, and what he said would shake Keir Starmer's government to its core. Imagine this: you've dedicated your entire adult life to serving your country, led soldiers into combat, made life and death decisions, followed rules of engagement even when it was difficult. Then you watch your government supply weapons to a military that you believe is committing war crimes, breaking the very rules you spent your career upholding. What do? Stay silent or speak out, knowing it will make you a target? Brigadier Deverell chose to speak, and he wasn't alone. How did we get here? October 2023. Hamas attacked Israel. Horrific violence, civilian casualties, hostages taken. Israel's response was immediate and massive. Military operations in Gaza, airstrikes, ground invasion. Britain's position under Starmer was consistent support. Israel has the right to defend itself. Deverell watched the initial response like most military professionals, understanding the need for security response but watching carefully for adherence to international law. Then the casualty numbers started mounting. Not hundreds, thousands, then tens of thousands. Civilian infrastructure targeted. Hospitals hit, schools destroyed, humanitarian aid blocked. Deverell started documenting everything, not as an activist, as a military professional assessing operations against the laws of armed conflict. His conclusion was damning. What he was witnessing wasn't defensive operations. It was systematic destruction, violating every principle of proportionality and distinction between military and civilian targets. November 2023. Reports emerged of British weapons being used in Gaza operations. UK supplied components in aircraft, British technology and targeting systems, arms exports continuing despite mounting evidence of potential war crimes. Deverell started reaching out to other retired officers. Lieutenant General Sir Andrew Graham, former Director General of the UK Defence Academy, Major General Peter Curry, Major General Charlie Herbert, who'd commanded in Afghanistan, all had similar concerns. All had reached similar conclusions about what they were witnessing. They started drafting the letter, not in anger, in professional assessment. December 2023, first year of conflict, 70,000 Palestinians dead according to Health Ministry. Majority women and children. Gaza's infrastructure systematically destroyed. Humanitarian crisis deepening. Famine warnings from international organizations. And British arms exports to Israel continuing. Starmer's government offered verbal concerns about civilian casualties, but took no concrete action to restrict arms sales or military cooperation. Deverell and his colleagues watched with growing alarm. This wasn't just policy disagreement. This was potential complicity in violations of international humanitarian law. January 2024. They requested meeting with Defense Secretary. Wanted to express concerns privately first. Give government chance to course correct. Request declined. Told their concerns were noted, but policy wouldn't change. February 2024. More reports of indiscriminate weapons use, targeting patterns that suggested systematic destruction rather than precision operations against military targets. Deverell compared Israeli operations to British military doctrine. The differences were stark. British forces are trained on strict rules of engagement, proportionality, distinction, precaution, accountability for violations. What he observed in Gaza showed none of those constraints. Massive munitions in civilian areas, repeated strikes on protected sites, no apparent accountability. March 2024. International Court of Justice issued preliminary ruling on genocide case, found plausible risk of genocide, ordered provisional measures. Britain's response? Continued arms sales. Deverell was incredulous. A genocide case at ICJ in UK still supplying weapons? April 2024. Defense Ministry source claimed Israeli military operations resemble our own in terms of targeting processes. That statement enraged Deverell. He'd spent his career in British military. He knew British procedures. What Israel was doing in Gaza resembled nothing in British doctrine. He drafted a response challenging that claim. Submitted it to Ministry of Defense, received no reply. July 2024, Labour won election. Starmer became Prime Minister. Deverell hoped for policy change, new government, fresh approach, maybe willingness to take stronger stance. Initial signs were disappointing. Foreign Secretary David Lammy suggested more balanced approach, then backed down under pressure. August 2024, Starmer announced partial suspension of some arms export licenses. Sounded significant. Details revealed it was minimal. Most military exports continued. F-35 components specifically exempted. Technology transfers ongoing. Deverell saw it as performative rather than substantive. Designed to deflect criticism without actually changing policy. September 2024. Reports emerged of British reconnaissance flights over Gaza. Over 500 missions since conflict began. Official explanation. Looking for hostages. Security analysts skeptical. Intelligence gathered could support Israeli targeting. Britain potentially directly involved in operations. Deverell added it to his evidence file. October 2024. 1 year into conflict. Casualty toll catastrophic. Gaza largely destroyed. Ceasefire negotiations repeatedly failed. Israeli operations continue with British political and material support. Deverell and his co-signatories finalized their letter. Comprehensive, detailed, devastating. November 2024. Before sending to Prime Minister, they shared it with legal experts in international humanitarian law. Response was unanimous. Their analysis was sound, concerned, legitimate, evidence compelling. December 2024. Final decision time. Send the letter and go public or keep concerns private. All four men understood implications. This would make them targets. Pro-Israel groups would attack them. Government would be hostile. Media would scrutinize their records, but they'd spent careers following rules of armed conflict. Couldn't stay silent while watching those rules, violated with British complicity. They signed. 4 decorated officers, accusing their government of potential complicity in war crimes. December 23, 2024. Letter delivered to Downing Street, simultaneously released to media. The opening was direct. Despite the fragile ceasefire in Gaza, now is not the time to return to business as usual with the Israeli government. Then came the core accusations. Indiscriminate munitions causing disproportionate civilian casualties, widespread destruction of civilian infrastructure, systematic attacks on hospitals and schools, evidence of torture and mistreatment of detainees. The conclusion was unequivocal. Evidence of war crimes is so well documented and compelling that the British government should cut all military collaboration with Israel forthwith to avoid the charge of complicity. Not suggestions. Demands. Full arms embargo. Ban on involvement with Israeli defense companies. Suspension of military technology transfers. End to RAF support for Israeli operations. The letter detonated across British media. Front page news. Lead story on broadcasts. Because these weren't random critics. These were men who'd commanded British forces, understood military operations, knew the difference between legitimate defense and war crimes. Starmer's immediate response was defensive. The government takes its international legal obligations seriously and has robust processes for assessing arms export licenses. Standard political deflection. Didn't address the substance of accusations. Deverell gave interview to the Times. Calm, professional. Devastating. I've spent my career following rules of armed conflict. I've operated in complex environments where distinguishing between civilians and combatants was difficult. But we had strict procedures. We had accountability. What I see in Gaza shows neither. The interviewer asked about government claim that Israeli procedures resemble British ones. Deverell's response was withering, absolutely false. British forces are trained to minimize civilian casualties, even at cost to operational efficiency. We use precision weapons. We have strict approval chains for strikes near civilian areas. What's happening in Gaza is the opposite: massive munitions in dense civilian areas, repeated attacks on protected sites, no apparent constraint or accountability. Pro-Israel groups immediately attacked him, called him anti-Semitic, said he didn't understand Israeli security situation. Deverell anticipated it. His response: I'm not criticizing Israel's right to security. I'm criticizing specific operational methods that violate international humanitarian law. Those are different things. And calling legitimate legal concerns anti-Semitic is a deflection tactic. December 24th, Christmas Eve. Other retired military officers started speaking out in support. Former senior officers, intelligence veterans, defense analysts, all backing Deverell's assessment. One retired general told BBC, when someone with Brigadier Deverell's experience and credibility makes these accusations, government can't just dismiss them. He's not a politician or activist. He's a professional making a professional judgment about compliance with laws of armed conflict. December 25th, Christmas Day. The story dominated news. Opposition parties demanding Starmer respond substantively, not with talking points, but with actual engagement with the allegations. Labor MPs from constituencies with large Muslim populations facing intense pressure, their constituents demanding government take stronger action. December 26th, Boxing Day. Starmer gave interview attempting damage control. We have partially suspended some arms exports. We take allegations of international law violations seriously. But we also recognize Israel's legitimate security concerns and right to self-defense. Standard equivocation. Trying to please everyone, satisfying no one. Deverell responded on social media. Partial suspension is inadequate when the evidence of systematic violations is this strong. Self-defense doesn't exempt any military from international humanitarian law. British government knows this. They should act on it. December 27th, pressure intensified. Parliament would return in New Year. Emergency debate already being demanded. More retired officers adding names to letters supporting Deverell's position. The list growing. Defense industry lobbyists pushing back. Claiming arms embargo would damage UK-Israel relationship and British defense industry. Deverell's counter. If our defense industry profits require us to be complicit in potential war crimes, then we need to reconsider those relationships. Moral and legal obligations come before commercial interests. December 30th. Reports emerged about £2 billion British Army training contract. One bidder. Consortium, including Elbit Systems, major Israeli defense contractor. Deverell immediately flagged it. Government can't claim to take our concerns seriously while awarding massive contracts to companies directly involved in operations we believe violate international law. December 31st, New Year's Eve. Starmer's government facing multiple crises, economic troubles, political scandals, and now this decorated war heroes accusing him of war crimes complicity. Public polling showed devastating numbers. 61% believe government should implement full arms embargo on Israel. Only 23% supported current policy. Even among labor voters, 68% wanted stronger action. Starmer was trapped, changed policy, and faced accusations of abandoning Israel. Maintain policy and face accusations of war crimes, complicity from military professionals. January 1st, 2026, New Year's Day. Deverell published op-ed in Guardian. Title: I spent 30 years defending Britain. Now I'm defending international law from my own government. The piece was powerful. Personal account of his military service, explanation of laws of armed conflict, analysis of Gaza operations. Conclusion that British complicity was indefensible. Final paragraph: I didn't speak out lightly. I know the attacks that will come, but I also know that silence in the face of potential war crimes is itself a moral failure. I served my country for 3 decades. This is how I continue serving it, by demanding we uphold the values we claim to defend. 5 million people read it in first day. January 2nd. Emergency cabinet meeting. Ministers divided. Some supported policy change. Others worried about political cost. Starmer held line. We're not changing policy based on one letter from retired officers. But it wasn't one letter anymore. It was growing movement of military professionals, legal experts, human rights organizations, and increasingly the British public. January 3rd, Parliament returned. Opposition tabled motion calling for full arms embargo. Debate scheduled for the following week. Labour MPs would have to vote on record for complicity or against it. Starmer's whip's office started counting votes. The numbers were terrifying. Potentially 50 Labour MPs prepared to rebel. January 5th, Deverell gave testimony to Parliamentary Committee investigating arms exports under oath. January 7th. The debate arrived, packed Commons, media everywhere. Deverell watched from gallery. The man who'd started this with one letter. The vote came. Motion calling for full arms embargo. It passed. 348 to 289. 47 Labour MPs voted for it. Another 12 abstained. Starmer's government defeated on major policy issue. The cameras turned to Deverell, in gallery standing, stoic, vindicated.